Dear Greg, the other day I went with my mother when she returned something she'd bought to the store. Right behind the cashier there was a sign that said merchandise had to be returned within 2 weeks. But my mother had waited for more than a month. When the clerk explained the policy, my mother started raising her voice and making a scene. I was so embarrassed. I wanted to disappear into a hole in the floor. She went through all that just to get $9. $9. It wasn't worth it. When we got in the car, I tried to talk to her about how she'd embarrassed me, but she just got mad at me. She would not admit she was wrong. How could I have gotten her to see what she did?
When we don't feel enough real love in our lives, the emptiness and pain are unbearable. And then we naturally try to make ourselves feel better by doing two things. First, we use any form of imitation love we can find. And second, we strongly resist the loss of the imitation love we already have. Your mother illustrates both of these efforts perfectly. When the clerk told her she couldn't return the item, she heard the clerk tell her she was wrong, which involves being less acceptable and out of control. That means a loss of approval and power, both forms of imitation love. In the absence of sufficient real love, your mother simply could not tolerate having somebody threaten her supply of imitation love like that. So she fought back. It may have seemed like a small thing to you, but when imitation love is all you have, you defend it with your life if necessary. So, your mother argued and raised her voice. She was trying to protect her supply of imitation love, to keep the clerk from telling her she was wrong, and also to get a feeling of power that would temporarily fill up her emptiness, which was worth a lot more to her than the just $9 you referred to. Ironically, your behavior was actually similar to your mother's. When she behaved badly, you were concerned only that the clerk might associate you with your mother, and that he then disapprove of you. You couldn't do anything about that, though, so when you got to the car, you tried to make up for your loss of approval in the store by telling your mother that she was wrong, which gave you a sense of power. You also wanted to prevent her from doing something like that to you again in the future. You felt especially justified in talking to your mother because she'd made a mistake that affected you personally. But it affected you only because of your need for approval. What she did really had nothing at all to do with you. And she had every right to behave as she wished, even though she did behave like a spoiled child. You'll be much happier here as you learn how you could have modified your own behavior, not your mother's. You could have chosen to just stand quietly by her, accepting her unconditionally and just waiting until the argument was over. It had nothing to do with you. Or you could have simply walked away to someplace else in the store and waited for her to finish her petulant little argument. Later, in the car, you didn't need to say a word to her about what she'd done. She needed your love, not your criticism. It's almost always much more useful to see the truth about our own selfishness rather than trying to point out the mistakes of others. That's how we learn that it's always about real love.